Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're well. So, here in the summer, I don't know if it's just because it's summer or what, but I've kind of been letting my mind wander a little bit. We have been doing a series on the book of Acts. I've been thinking about the fall, neighborhood groups, kind of what we're going to be focusing on as a church. And also just being summer, you're in a different mindset. You're trying to relax a little bit, enjoy the sun while it's out there. And for whatever reason, I've just kind of been a little less industrious in my thinking, so to speak. And I've decided to just kind of try to take what summer should give in our minds and try to rest a little bit. And so maybe you know what I'm saying. Maybe because it's kind of mid-August now, you're starting to feel like we're almost done with summer. Got to get every last bit out of it. I don't know if you think that way. I think that way. And so I've just been wanting to rest, and maybe that is why my mind got drawn to Psalm 127. Psalm 127 is one of my favorite psalms, and now it's even more my favorite after this week. But let me put it on the screen and just read what it says first, okay? Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain, you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring, a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. So, like I said, it's one of my favorite psalms, and you are probably thinking, that's why he has so many children. That's not actually it. It's unrelated. And this is actually about more than just physical offspring, as we'll get to. This psalm is actually somewhat unique among the psalms, because the psalms, most of them, if you don't know, there's like 120 some in the Bible, and psalms are, is it 120 or more than that? I don't know. Someone's going to fact check. I forget how many there are. There's a lot of them. And the Psalms most of them are either praise to God or lament or a mix of the two. But this psalm is different. This psalm is considered wisdom, all right? Wisdom. And it's written by Salamone, who, that's a whole other story with him, but he had a lot of wisdom. God gave him wisdom. And anyways, I have some wisdom to share with you from this psalm, but first I got to do something else. First, I have to make sure that I'm speaking to you where you are at. I'm going to try to do that. That's something when I speak to other preachers and I'm trying to lead and teach, one of the things that I talk about is how you have to make sure you're talking to people where they are at. Finding people where they are at. Because if you're not actually reaching them where they are at, you might as well just talk to the wall. And all of you, if I'm not speaking to you, you might as well just take out your phone and, kill some time, because your phone knows where you're at. You know what I mean by that? As in, like, social media, they know you. They've been studying you, okay? Those algorithms know exactly what they're doing. They're studying you, and they know how to keep your attention because they know what you want. Let our preachers be that aware. They know what you want, and you want. I can just tell you this. Without knowing every one of you super deep, I can tell you this. You want something. Why do you want something? Because God made us to want things. It's part of the physical realm in which he created. And actually, if you look at this psalm, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. Just right there, there's some things that speak to things we all want. A house, a home. There's no place like home. There's something about a home that speaks to this inward desire that we have for rest, for comfort, for pleasures, luxury. We want a home, a city. We want a community, something that we can be proud of. You keep going and it says they're not going to be put to shame. Things we all want. Things we all want is a name, an identity, a reputation, not to be put to shame, a name that we can feel proud of. It's not bad. Right here, it's what God has promised. Now, these things that we all want, how did I say it last week? Security, comfort, happiness, not sadness, pleasure, not pain. Those are not bad things to want. In fact, God made us this way. There is an ancient heresy known as Gnosticism that the Bible is often in the New Testament speaking about. And this ancient heresy basically said that the physical realm is bad. The physical realm with all its desires are bad. And if you want real spirituality, you need to get above that and just live in this spiritual realm. And the reason that's nonsense is God created this physical realm as a display of who he is. Okay? So these physical enjoyments, these things like a home and a city, these things are supposed to communicate things about God and who he is and who he is towards his children. All that to say is you want things in life. I don't know the specifics of what you want. Look at your phone, scroll through your social media and see what's popping up. Those are the things you want, the things that you dream of. All right? They know it. They've figured it out. Let me just summarize it with this. And hopefully you can connect with this. You want comfort. You want security, safety. You want a name. You want to feel proud of your life. It manifests in different ways. These are things that we naturally want. And this psalm of wisdom is going to speak into that. Because there is a way of pursuing these things that is, it says here, in vain, which means worthless. It's empty. But there's something else of substance that God wants to give us. Father God, let your word speak to us, Lord. Let your wisdom fall on our hearts, Lord. Let us hear from you. Let us be encouraged, changed. Lord, let us find rest for our souls. And Lord, let us, as a church, bear children. Lord, as the psalm speaks about. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Okay, so yeah, like I say, there's a mindset that it's kind of warning you against. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. A warning against just kind of doing it yourself. In the sense of, well, we want these things. We want, fill in the blank, but it all comes down to, pleasure, not pain, happiness, not sadness, security, fill in the blank. For some, it's money. For some, it's just, you just want a weekend to play video games, whatever it is. We have our heart and our mind set on things. And, there's a little bit of a warning. And the warning is kind of just trying to do it yourself. And what I want you to understand is that is the normal way of living life. I'm going to go to something that Jesus said, and this might sound familiar to you. It's often quoted for good reason. Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 15. Hear this. Jesus speaking, then Jesus said to them, watch out. Be on guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded of you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. What I want you to see is that what he just described here is, if you would allow me to speak of the place of my where I came from, what he just spoke of is what I call the American dream, okay? And being a close neighbor of America, you probably have an idea of what that means. As in, he's not, Jesus, this guy is known as the rich fool, the parable of the rich fool. And a fool is obviously something you don't want to be. But notice this, he's not doing anything that we would call evil. It's not like we read about him oppressing people or stealing from people. He's doing what for so many people is the normal way of life. And that's why Jesus says, watch out. Watch out. Be on guard. Be on guard against this. What is he doing? He wants what we all want. He wants a sense of rest. And he thinks to himself, I know where I shall find this rest. I will find this rest in a nice early retirement. What a normal way of thinking, right? Build barns, say to yourself, hey, I have lots of stuff. Eat, drink, and be merry, relax. And Jesus says, be careful. Be careful, because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. That will not actually, by itself, give you the heart rest that you long for. It won't actually do it. Well, why won't it? Man, it would be nice to have a lot of money. You ever think that? It'd be nice. This guy's got a lot of money. It'd be nice to have a lot of money and to be able to buy whatever you want. To me, it sounds like rest. What is wrong with this by itself? Well, what's wrong with it is what it's missing. When God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you, then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God. The problem wasn't his big barns or his money. The problem is what he didn't have. He wasn't rich towards God. He thought that the rest for his soul would be found in things of the world. Things of the world can be very helpful, and I'm so thankful for many of the things that I have. But if you're not rich towards God, all of that is of how much value? Nothing. Zero. My boy, he's 7 years old. 7 years old, and we were playing video games the other day. No joke, we're playing video games the other day. And sometimes kids say things where you're just like, this kid is getting older. We're playing video games. Sometimes we do that at night. And he says, out of the blue, what's the point of living if everyone's going to die at the end? He's starting to think about things that around that age you start to think about. He's 7 years old. What's the point of living if you just die at the end? And here's something. That's a very important question to ask. You might think, you might think to yourself, well, that's a silly question because there's lots of good things in life. You don't have to think about death. Wrong. That's an important question to ask. What is it? Psalm 90. Psalm 90. Teach me to number my days so that I might have a heart of wisdom. In other words, be very aware that there's an end date. Be very aware of death so that you might find wisdom. Because it is true. It is true. This fellow, what did Jesus say? What did God say to him? Who will get what you've prepared for yourself? As in, you can't keep it. As in, how much value? When I was 16, I got my first car. And I don't know why I was thinking about it. It was a 1986 Audi 5000S, 5 cylinders, manual transmission. I loved it. It was fast. All right? I don't know what happened to that car. Can't remember. How much is it worth to me now? How much can I get for it on the market? Well, I don't have it anymore. Nothing. It's worth nothing. Okay? It's a nice memory, but it is of zero value. It's gone, like the wind. There's a warning here against trying to rest in something that won't actually provide in the end. All right? It's not complicated. Let's return to Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, the laborers build in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. So it's in vain, it's worthless, as in one of the ways that that which we do with our own hands apart from God is worthless is in the sense of we can't actually keep it. We don't keep it in the end. But there's something else going on here. Because I'm speaking here at church, and I know so many of you. And I know that you are doing the things that we all do, that we all have to do. You're working for paychecks, and you're working on your home. You're a lot of you are working on your basements right now, trying to fix and secure things. A lot of you are doing the things like myself, like we all do. We're working for things like homes and food and, maybe bigger barns or whatever. And I also know that even though we're working towards those things, the warning that Jesus applied, it can be helpful, but I know your hearts, and I'd say we are rich towards God, as in we have him. So in one way, that the warning maybe doesn't apply to us in the same way because we know him. We're not going to meet him on the final day and have him say, "You fool," because it's like we have gotten to know each other over the years. As in, you know who God is. I'm speaking to so many people who know who God is. But there's something that is here for you that's very helpful and very good. Verse 2, it says, "In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves." Another translation that I'm aware of, it says, "It's in vain that you rise up early and stay up late, eating the bread of anxious toil." All right? Here's what I'm getting at. Here's where I think I'm speaking to a lot of us. No, I'm speaking to myself. Even though we know God, how many of us are well acquainted with feelings of busyness and exhaustion? Okay? I'm not just talking about like busyness, because sometimes I like to be busy. I'm talking about anxious toil, exhaustion. The feeling that I was having at the beginning of the week that it's like, oh no, summer is almost over. The busy season is coming. Am I ready for it? That's kind of where this sermon was born of. My own little oh no, I don't know if I'm ready for this. My wife and I were laying in bed 2 days ago, and I got hit with something. I got hit with a realization. I knew that we're heading into a busy season. That's kind of how the fall goes. And realized we have 5 children who are going to be going to 5 different schools. Do you have any idea how much buses and carpools and drop-off spots? And my wife says, I feel like I'm like the logistics manager of some sort of shipping company, trying to figure out all these packages and where they're going and how. And just the realization of like, this is a busy life. That's just getting the kids to school and getting them home. There's still so much more things that have to be accomplished. And then I think about the church and how we're trying to do something bold, something big. In my mind, this neighborhood groups is something big. And there was a temptation to fall into anxious toil. I'm well acquainted with anxious toil. But luckily, I'd been thinking about this passage. And I feel like God has greatly blessed me because I just relearned an old lesson, or maybe learned a lesson that I've always known in a deeper way. The good news of manna, if you know what that means. So when it came to God's people in the wilderness, we've talked about this a lot and we'll continue to. God's people in the wilderness, as he was calling them, he was trying to teach them how to trust him. Remember? Because even though he saved them, even though they walked through the Red Sea, when hard times came, they still did what we all do and they freaked out, right? They still freaked out when bad things happened. And God didn't like that because he was thinking, I am your God and I am with you taking care of you. You don't know that? You don't trust me? And then so God's like, all right, I'm going to teach you how to trust me. I'm going to teach you how to trust me. And the way that he did it was with manna. And this is how manna worked. This is how manna worked. Or this is how it was supposed to work. For many of them, they never actually learned the lesson, but some did. Not many. But that was the goal with manna. The goal with manna was to teach this lesson. You're walking through the desert, so that there is a problem. And you learn that, hey, when we wake up in the morning, food is just magically there. We just have to go and get it. And then, we need food tomorrow. The next day comes. What is that? I think that's literally what manna means, is like, what is it? Something like that. It's like, what? Well, there it is. It showed up again. Go to bed in the desert. You wake up again the next day. That stuff is there again. I'll go and grab it. You only have enough for one day. So night after night, they're going to bed with no food, okay? In the desert, with big families, a whole community. Night after night, they're going to bed with nothing. How many times did they freak out? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? How long did it take for them to say, you know what? I think the manna is going to be there tomorrow. Do you know what I'm saying? And this is my wife said to me this morning, this is going to be like a new mantra in our house. The manna will be there tomorrow. This is the freeing truth. What we need will be there tomorrow when we need it. How did Jesus say? Tomorrow will worry about itself. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about tomorrow. And this is the point to see and hear. And remember, we have a God who is caring for us and loves us. And he could just fix all of our problems, give you the millions of dollars. You could just do all that. And maybe you would be comfortable, like the rich fool. Maybe I actually think it's true. Even though they say like more money, more problems, I think if you had a lot of money, you probably have less problems. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's the case. But here's what you wouldn't have. You wouldn't have to rely on him, would you? And you wouldn't actually be rich. You would be like the fool. And God wants you to be rich. Real rich. Real riches. And real riches come from knowing that you have a God who's going to be there tomorrow, giving you what you need tomorrow. I don't know how we are going to do it. By the way, 5 kids, 5 schools, lots of other responsibilities. I don't know exactly how all that's going to work out, but that's okay because I know who's with us, and he's going to be with us tomorrow. In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. The sleep of the beloved, the sleep of the one who knows that God is with you and he's going to be with you tomorrow. And what you need tomorrow will be granted tomorrow. Learn that lesson. Learn that lesson. And you know something? I know that we say a lot, which is true, like we're never going to be perfect this side of heaven. Like I get that. God's still always going to be working on us. There's always going to be growth. I get that. But at the same time, I read this. This is the Apostle Paul. This is in Philippians. I think it's Philippians 4. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. And hear this. I have learned the secret. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. He says, there is a secret to be learned. And he says, and I've learned it. That's something. We can get to a place where we have learned a secret, and the secret is to be content. And how? How? Is it because we have enough money where our problems are fixed? No, he's saying, no, in trouble, and even in times of hunger. Even when there's a lot going on in life, I've learned the secret to be content. What is the secret, you say? He says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Or to say it another way, he's always going to be there. And I know he's always going to be there. I trust that the manna will be there tomorrow. The one who trusts in the Lord will renew their strength. Their strength will be renewed. Sometimes when I think about it, it's like, I don't know how is the energy going to be there for what I need to do tomorrow? I have such a busy day, this. And you feel that. I don't know if you know that world, but I live in that world often, and I think that the manna will be there tomorrow. What you need tomorrow will be there tomorrow because God is with you. And this is true riches, to learn to rest in this. To learn to rest in this. This is the sleep of the beloved. This is the heart rest that he is preparing us for. And there's more. There's more. Keep reading. You get to verse 3. Children are a heritage from the Lord. Offspring, a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. So just like on the surface, children, I don't know why. It's weird how my mind goes strange places when I'm thinking about a passage, but I started thinking about, of all things, pandas. And it's just in the news, a certain panda in Hong Kong, I believe it was, had twins, which is like a super big deal. Pandas are very rare. And I started to think, well, yeah, pandas are pretty rare. I did see one at a zoo once. It was pretty cool, and I know they have them at various zoos. Why don't they just get these pandas together? Like you get a male panda and a female panda. And you think we can just put an end to this whole like endangered species thing, right? Why can't we? And there's a reason we can't. Because pandas, like a lot of other endangered species, they don't often breed in captivity. There is something about not feeling free and wild that hinders that fruit of reproduction. Do you know what I'm saying? This thing about children In the Bible, understanding in Christ, the concept of children is about more than physical offspring. It's about spiritual offspring. And I dream, and I still dream, about a church that is multiplying and overflowing. And we don't even have room to seat all the people who are coming. I mean, that's just the heart of God. Wants people to come and know and see and hear. And here's something that I know. Reproduction will happen when we are free. Do you understand that? Like, I feel like God is calling us. God is calling us to a level of contentment, of happiness and joy. Not because we're suddenly all rich. No. Because we've learned the secret that God is with us, and he's going to be with us tomorrow, and he's going to take care of us. And when it comes to children, this is something else that I know is true, because I have a lot of them. When you feel busy and exhausted, there is nothing worse than a screaming kid who wants your attention. When you feel busy and exhausted, there's nothing worse than a child who just wants you to interact with them. I'm too busy. But when you're feeling full, and content, it is such a joy. It's such a joy hanging out with little kids. The calling that I feel that we have as a church is to be a family, the children of God, to be a community, and that's why we're talking about neighborhood groups. And when you think about neighborhood groups, we're living in this rat race together. I get it. We're all busy. We're all exhausted. Here is, I think, a hindrance in our minds, naturally. I don't know how I'm going to fit something else into my schedule. I'm busy. Okay, you feel that? I'm busy. I need rest. Beloved, by faith, what I am seeking is, what I'm asking for, what we're asking for by faith is not another busy thing in your schedule, but instead a time of deep happiness and contentment and rest. Because this is something I've learned also. It's not just children. When I'm feeling busy and exhausted, the idea of Christian fellowship, inviting someone over, going and hanging out, going and doing something, it sounds like work. And it sounds like I don't have the headspace for that, you know? But here's something else I've discovered. When I am feeling happy and my heart is singing because I'm well aware of the truth of God, I want to be around other Christians. That's when I start to think, who can we invite over? What's going on? Because I know there's just something joyful about that. And beloved, hear this. That is the life he is calling us to. Not a life of anxious toil. He is calling us to a life of contentment and rest and happiness. The early church, they were busy like we were. They were meeting together every day, and no one told them to. That's a question that I've been asking. Why were they meeting together every day when no one even told them to? It's because they were so happy. They were so happy and aware of God that they just wanted to be around one another because it had a way of fueling that. Beloved, that's the life that he is calling us to, and that is a life that I believe is going to bring forth children. It's going to bring forth reproduction in our neighborhoods. That's what I'm asking for, and by faith, Lord, I pray that you're hearing this. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. A name. The call of God is to share in his glory. That is this whole idea that they will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. This idea that we have an adversary. There's an adversary of our souls. There's an enemy. And what is he seeking to do? For the Christian, he's seeking to steal your joy. I think I'm going to pick up on that in a couple weeks. I think what I would like to do now, we've been talking a lot about neighborhood groups, and there's still some things that we need to figure out. I'm going to invite Nita up, and we'll do a time of Q&A like we often do. But if I could ask you guys, when we talk about community groups, are there specific questions that come to mind? You can also ask questions about what I just talked about. But I thought maybe it would be helpful to gauge questions in that. Because maybe there are things we haven't yet thought of. I'm not guaranteeing I'm having the answer, but maybe they are. Maybe the things we have thought of as we prepare.
So if you're here and you'd rather not stand up and people recognize you, you can text to the number behind me. And if you're online, please add your question to the text, and I will be receiving it right here. And if you'd like to put your hand up, please do so. So who's thinking about going to a neighborhood group? All right. Anybody got a question about
I have a question, Nita.
Yeah.
If we're interested in being part of a neighborhood group, what's something that we should do? What should we do, Nita?
We should go to the webpage and sign up.
There you go. Oh, here actually is a small question. On the webpage, one of the questions when you're signing up is, are you willing to host? If you check that box, that does not mean you're saying that you will host every week. It's just saying that you're open to hosting some of the time. It's just a small little detail.
So if you're not willing to kind of go out midwinter, like hosting is a great opportunity to get that whole community feel and not have to brave the cold, the rain, the sleet, the ice. So I signed up to host. I'm planning on just putting on a pot of soup. Hello, Instapot. Here we go. Community happens.
Yeah. I was thinking about, here I am talking again without a question being proposed, but I was thinking about how when Jesus fed the people in the wilderness, it was in the wilderness, when Jesus fed the 5,000, which was kind of like an echo of the whole manna experience. He had them sit down in groups when he fed them. There is something about doing this together by which we feast.
So, what if we have to get up early the next day? How do we get people out of our house?
That's a good question. No, it's honestly a good question. We are going to have set times and ask for people to really try to respect that. I mean, if there's a host that says, hey, anyone can feel free to hang out longer if they want, I guess that's up to them. But yeah, that is something that we're going to probably have a time, because it is good to plan,
So if you're hosting, does that mean that you also are leading that night?
That's a great question also. No. Signing up to host does not mean that you will be facilitating discussion or anything like that. It really just means that you have a home that you think is good for having people. Yeah.
Well, what if you've never hosted before? Is there training? How do we know what we're supposed to be doing?
Well, when it comes to the group leaders, a lot of them will be the elders in our church, but not only the elders. One of the things we have in mind is for every neighborhood group, we want 2 leaders. So forget about host for a second. 2 leaders, as in maybe 2 couples, or maybe an individual and a couple, 2 different leaders, so it's not just rested on one person. But also the host, when we think of host, that is, again, just opening up their home. And the different neighbor groups will meet and they'll come up with, to a degree, their own plans. But just because you're opening your home doesn't mean you're doing any cooking. Someone else might say, I love to cook and I'd love to bring a big pot of soup each week, but I don't really have a home that's good for that. I'd rather just bring it to someone else's house. Or they might be thinking, I like to cook, but the idea of having people in my home stresses me out. But then you have someone else that's like, it's easier for me to have people over than to have to go somewhere else. There's something really cool about how God brings things together, you know? And that's ultimately what we're trusting in. This is such a move of faith. This is such a move of, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and trust that this is going to be worth it. And there's just one more thing I want to say, because I'm on a little bit of a thing here. At first, expect and be okay with a certain level of awkwardness, okay? Because until you really get to know one another, that is normal. One of the things we're going to be doing in the beginning is spending at least a couple months sharing each other's stories and getting to know one another. And we'll have a way to do that so it's not like intimidating or weird. But until you really get to know each other, expect a certain level of awkwardness. But by faith, we're going to get through that part. And when you get to the part where we have a bunch of people in our own neighborhood who we know, who knows us, that's where I feel like we've reached the new level of living the Christian life.
So this is multi-generational, right? So young adults, teens, like whoever, wherever in the community, in that neighborhood can get together. But what if your house is not safe enough for kids, or you don't have a place to put kids? Like, how does that work?
To be honest, I think that many, if not most, of the neighborhood groups will have children, small children, that is. But there might be, I'd say there probably will be some neighborhood groups that don't. We are still planning on how to integrate children into these groups, because we want to have times during the groups where the children are with the adults and then times that they're not. And that's going to require a good amount of logistics. This is where it's very easy to start thinking, how are we going to make all this work? Okay? And what's really cool is the manna will be there. And by manna, I mean the right plans, the right people, the right spaces, the right leaders, the right volunteers, because there is going to need to be people designated to helping with the children. And we're going to need a bunch of volunteers, because we don't want the same people doing it every week. So there's so much that God has to provide. And what is exciting about this is God provided manna in the wilderness. He will.
So what is the purpose of these groups besides getting together and eating?
Oh, it's great. Great question. I'm glad that was asked. Getting together, eating. I mean, if you look why the church got together in Acts chapter 2 when they were meeting every day, it was for fellowship, for prayer, leaning on one another. Because life is hard and we need to be reminded. My wife and I, we were able to talk when we had this realization, hey, we got 5 kids going to 5 different schools. How did this happen? What is going on? And to a certain degree, able to relieve the stress just talking and knowing the truth that God is with us. The scriptures speak about meeting together, and it equates that with encouraging one another. You know, you start to feel that anxious toil of life that the devil wants us to feel. You start to feel that. But when you're around friends and you can be like, pray for me because this is going on. Pray for me because this is going on. And doing that together no longer is the anxious toil upon you. So encouragement. But there's something else. There's something else. It's not just getting together, eating together. Living the mission together. And when I say living the mission together, each neighborhood group is going to kind of figure out for themselves what that means. I imagine some neighborhood groups will probably be like, serving at a soup kitchen or something like that once in a while. But even now, when I say doing the mission together, I don't want you to think, okay, here we go, work. No. That's not it. the way that we are going to serve in the mission together is going to be living in community with a joy. With a joy, like I say, pandas reproduce when they're out and they're happy. We're going to be happy. Honestly, when I think of mission, I think of one of the best things neighborhood groups will be able to do is just go to the park together, go somewhere public, and hang out together. And be the community out in the community. And that's where you meet people who see, wow, you guys have something here, you know? Pastor Cheryl is going to talk about this in 2 weeks, I believe, more about the specifics of neighborhood groups and what exactly we're doing. So hopefully we'll fill in some of those gaps, but I also hope that I was able to answer a little bit for you.
So the last question will be from Roger.
Uh-oh. Can we do someone else?
Charlie would like to do somebody else than Roger.
Just be ready to cut the mic.
I feel this neighborhood group is unfair to Alpha. So Alpha, can it be considered as a neighborhood group on Mondays? Because it's starting soon.
It's a great point in the sense of what I've heard about Alpha, the sense of community, the sense of mission. I don't want people feeling like, okay, if I'm not in a community group, then if I'm not in a neighborhood group, then I am, that I am bad or whatever. You might, and I know you're really involved in Alpha, you might actually decide this is where God has me, and this will be my community. You might decide I'm going to do this, and I'm also going to do a neighborhood group. We're not going to be legalistic and say you have to do it this way, otherwise you're not serving God. That's just not how things work. Alpha has been going great. It's bore a lot of fruit. I want to keep going with Alpha. I wouldn't classify it as a neighborhood group, just because when we speak of neighborhood groups, we're speaking about something specific. But yeah, in a lot of ways, they serve very similar functions. You guys eat together. You invite people in, the sense of community. Alpha is in some ways, I would say, an inspiration for neighborhood groups. So that's a good question.